When I opened the front door to my parents' house that morning, I didn't expect to find 5 children in pajamas, cereal spilled on the rug, and a deafening silence where adult voices should have been. My heart dropped. The suitcase in my hand suddenly felt useless. I wasn't going to Hawaii. I was already in hell. My name is Camille Rivers. I'm 34, live in Brooklyn, and I've built a solid, respected career as a marketing director at a global lifestyle brand. I'm sharp, decisive, and I don't flinch under pressure. At work, I command multi-million-dollar campaigns with ease. But in my personal life, I've been cast in a role I never auditioned for. The family's backup plan, the reliable fixer, the one who always says yes. Growing up as the eldest daughter meant I was never truly a child. While other kids were learning to ride bikes, I was learning how to soothe a colicky baby. While my classmates went to sleepovers, I stayed up late folding laundry and packing lunches. My parents praised me endlessly. "Camille, you're such a lifesaver." But their compliments were a leash. The more capable I became, the more invisible I was allowed to be. I thought I'd left that behind. I thought success would insulate me from being used. I was wrong. 2 months earlier, Tara had called me, her voice sugary and enthusiastic. "Camille, Mom's turning 65 soon, and we want to plan something big. A surprise trip, just us adults. No kids, no chaos. You in?" It had felt like a rare invitation, a gesture of inclusion. "Absolutely," I replied. I marked the week off on my calendar, shifted meetings, and wired over my share of the resort deposit. No questions asked. Now here I was, standing in the living room, surrounded by toddlers, diapers, and sippy cups. No Tara, no Melody, just a yellow Post-it on the fridge and an envelope on the table with my name on it. Inside the envelope was a note, scrawled in Tara's handwriting. "Flights got moved up. We didn't want to wake the kids. You've always been great with them, and we figured, well, you'd understand. Don't worry, the fridge is full and the emergency numbers are on the counter. We'll call soon. Love you." I stared at the paper. It didn't shake in my hand. I didn't cry. I wasn't even surprised. I'd been trained for this moment my whole life. What they didn't know was that I was no longer the Camille they remembered, the one who would swallow her rage and do what needed to be done. This time, they had miscalculated. As I picked up the cereal bowl Mia had dropped, I noticed her watching me. She was 9 now, quiet, curious, too observant for her age. "Did Mommy leave a suitcase?" she asked. "She said she'd only be gone for a few hours." That one sentence hit harder than the note. Tara hadn't just abandoned her children. She'd lied to them too. I tucked Mia's hair behind her ear and gave her a gentle smile. "Don't worry, I'm here. Everything's okay for now." But it wasn't, not for them, and definitely not for me. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, forcing my hands to stay steady. I opened my phone. First call, Tara, voicemail. Second, Melody, also voicemail. Third, my mother. She picked up. "Camille," she said brightly. "Are you at the house yet?" "I am," I replied flatly. "Oh, good. The kids aren't giving you trouble, are they?" Tara said everything would be smooth. Did she also mention I was never asked to babysit? A pause. Then, "Sweetheart, we just assumed. You've always helped out. And you're so good with them." "I'm not a nanny, Mom," I cut her off. "I'm not a safety net. I was invited on a vacation, and instead I've been manipulated into unpaid childcare. Again. Camille, don't be dramatic." That was the last thing she said before I hung up. The anger wasn't new. I'd felt it simmering for years, every time I canceled a date to attend one of Melody's baby showers, every time I spent holidays juggling casseroles and chaos while Tara showed up late with perfectly done nails. But this was the first time it crystallized into something cold and sharp. Strategy, action, clarity. I took the note, snapped a photo, and filed it under a folder I labeled Evidence. I scrolled through my contacts and tapped on a name I hadn't used before. Alicia Tran, an old college friend, now an attorney in family law. I left her a message. Then I dialed 311 and reported the incident. I was calm, factual. There are 5 minors left without a legal guardian. I have no custody. Their parents are unreachable. They directed me to Child Protective Services. Then the police. I gave them the address. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was protection. For the children, yes, but also for the woman I had become. Because for once, I was no longer going to play the role they'd written for me. As I ended the call, the doorbell rang. A neighbor, Mrs. Halverson, stood outside, holding a tray of cookies. I saw Tara's car gone and thought maybe you were watching the kids. Again. Actually, I said with a polite smile, I'm just here for the fallout. She blinked. Sorry? Don't be. This was long overdue. I shut the door gently behind me. The children were playing now. Mia looked up from the couch. Is Mommy coming back today? I kneeled in front of her. I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I promise you, someone is finally taking this seriously. And I meant it, not just for them, but for me. Let them tan under Hawaiian skies. Let them sip their cocktails and post their fake perfect family photos. When they came back, they wouldn't be walking into the same story because I was no longer playing the same role. They had written me off as the helper, the fixer, the dependable older sister. But they forgot something. Every fixer eventually learns how to break the system. And I was just getting started. It started with a phone call on a late Thursday evening, one of those moments where everything sounds just sweet enough to make you doubt your instincts. Tara's voice buzzed through my phone, bright and high-pitched, like someone trying too hard to sell something she knew wouldn't land on its own. Camille! Big news! Melody and I have been planning a surprise getaway for Mom's 65th. A real adults-only trip. It's gonna be amazing. No kids, no chaos, just relaxation. You in? She said it so casually, as if she hadn't spent the past 2 years dropping her kids at my apartment every other weekend, under the guise of needing just a couple hours. She spoke like the past hadn't existed, like I hadn't sacrificed birthdays, long weekends, and sleep to keep her world spinning. But I played along. Where to? I asked, sipping the glass of wine I'd just poured myself after a 12-hour day. Hawaii, she replied, dragging out the syllables like they were made of gold. My stomach fluttered, just briefly, with something dangerously close to hope. Sounds great, I said. And it did. It sounded like the first time I'd be included in something as a sister, not a caretaker. I imagined sipping cocktails by a pool, unbothered, unburdened. We're handling everything, she said. You just need to show up. Oh, and we'll all chip in for the resort. I'll text you the amount. I should have known then. I should have heard the rustle of old patterns hiding underneath her syrupy voice. But I ignored it. I wired the money within the hour. Weeks passed, and every time I asked about the itinerary, I got vague responses. Don't worry, we've got it covered. Just be at Mom's on the day. We'll all leave together. Melody, when I called her to double-check, laughed and said, You worry too much, Cam. Let yourself be spoiled for once. It was a script they'd used for years. Build me up with just enough affection to earn my trust, then pull the rug out and pretend I tripped on my own. But this time, I wasn't just waiting to fall. I was memorizing the choreography. At work, I tied up loose ends. I handed off key client files to my junior associate, a sharp woman named Nina who had been shadowing me for months. I even wrote up a backup strategy brief just in case. Nina had looked at me curiously. You're only gone a week, she said. You sure you want to prep all this? I gave her a small smile. Just a habit. I've learned not to count on other people's plans working out. The night before the trip, I sat on my couch staring at my carry-on suitcase, neatly packed. I'd even bought a new swimsuit, a navy one-piece with gold accents, elegant and sleek, like the woman I'd finally allowed myself to become. Something still nagged at me, though, so I checked my phone. No updated itinerary, no flight number, no group text confirming our departure time. It wasn't like me to be this passive, but I told myself I was overthinking it. This was supposed to be their gift to me, a chance to not be the planner, the fixer, the one who cleans up the emotional messes. So, I let it go. The next morning, I woke up early, did my hair, wore a linen blouse I'd been saving for vacation, and ordered a car to my parents' house. That was the designated meeting spot, neutral territory, where the whole family had always gathered before big trips. But as the car rolled down the familiar suburban street and pulled up to the curb, a strange heaviness settled over me. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I rang the doorbell. No response. I knocked harder. Finally, the door creaked open, pushed by Mia, Tara's oldest. "Auntie Camille?" she asked, surprised but relieved. "I thought you weren't coming." Stepped inside, taking in the sight of 5 kids in varying states of disarray. Melody's twins were crying in their bassinets. Tara's toddler was running in circles, barefoot, his face sticky with jam. Mia's eyes looked sunken, like she hadn't slept. The fridge hummed in the silence, loud and indifferent. No adults, no luggage, no sign of any plan except a single, manila envelope on the dining table. My fingers moved before my brain did, picking it up and tearing it open. The letter inside was both predictable and infuriating. "Camille, we had to catch an earlier flight. So sorry for the scramble. We knew you'd understand. The kids are comfy here and know you well. You've always been the responsible one. We'll send pics from the beach. Love you. Tanba mem that." Last line, "You've always been the responsible one," landed like a slap. No apology, no request, just another assumption that I would clean up their mess and thank them for the opportunity. I folded the note slowly, then placed it back. Into the envelope, my movements calm, deliberate. I wasn't going to lose it. That would have been satisfying for them, some evidence that I cared more than I claimed. No, this time I wasn't going to break. I was going to outmaneuver. I texted Tara. No response. Melody. Nothing. I called my mother, whose voicemail chirped, "Hi. It's Karen. Leave some love." I didn't leave a message. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and checked the fridge. Food, yes. Medicine, labeled. A schedule scribbled on the side of the fridge in Melody's handwriting. They'd prepped just enough to pretend they'd planned it all responsibly. That was the moment the anger cooled into something sharper, resolve. I texted Nina at work. "Activate the contingency file. I won't be reachable for a few days." She replied within seconds. "Understood. Let me know if you need anything." Then I opened my notes app and began drafting a timeline. Drop-off. Absence of consent. Number of minors. Duration. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted documentation. And I wanted control. From the living room, Mia called out. "Auntie Camille, can you help me with the twins?" Her voice was steady, but I could hear the strain. She'd been doing too much for too long, just like I had. I walked into the room, scooped up one of the crying babies, and looked at her. "Yes, I'll help, for now," I said softly. "But after this, things are going to be different." And I meant it. Because I had finally realized something. Being dependable wasn't a gift, it was a cage, and I was already halfway out the door. The sun had barely risen above the tree line, casting golden streaks through the blinds, when I stood, in my parents' living room, staring at the wreckage of trust. 5 children, all under the age of 10, moved like ghosts through the house, quiet, confused, hungry for routine and reassurance. None of them knew their mothers had flown across the Pacific 12 hours ago, leaving them behind like forgotten baggage. The silence felt heavy, like an accusation. I picked up a remote from under the couch and clicked off the blaring cartoons. The room stilled. Mia sat cross-legged on the rug, her thin arms wrapped around her knees, watching me like she was waiting for answers no child should have to seek. Her brothers had settled into a quiet game of building towers with cereal boxes and melodies. Twins had fallen asleep again in their rockers after their second bottle. Formula I had to dig out of a suitcase Melody had left in the hallway, unzipped but untouched, as if she'd packed in a hurry and never looked back. I moved through the house like I was cataloging a crime scene. Each detail, meticulously stacked diapers, a scrawled feeding schedule on the fridge, juice boxes lined like bricks in the bottom drawer, wasn't proof of preparation. It was evidence of premeditation. They had planned this. They had expected me to walk in and assume the role without protest. And worse, they knew I would. That was the real betrayal. On the kitchen table, the manila envelope still sat like an insult. I had read it 3 times already. The handwriting was unmistakable. Tara's. Careless loops, Melody's final line in pink gel pen as if to soften the blow. "We'll bring you something nice." As if abandonment could be balanced out with a souvenir mug from the resort gift shop. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Heard you're with the kids. Thank you, sweetheart. You're truly a blessing. Blessing." That word had become poison. In my mouth. A blessing to who? To a family that built their convenience on my exhaustion? To 2 sisters who weaponized my love for their children into a tool for their escape? I didn't reply. Instead, I walked upstairs to my old bedroom, needing a moment of stillness. The door creaked open to a space that hadn't changed since I left for college. Lavender walls, a faded corkboard still holding a photo of my high school drama club, the one play I never got to perform in because Melody had a fever, and Mom needed someone she could count on. I sat on the bed, closed my eyes, and let myself feel it. Not sadness, not even rage. What filled me was something quieter, colder. Precision. If they had expected a breakdown, they'd be disappointed. I wasn't breaking. I was observing, calculating, strategizing. Back downstairs, Mia had wandered into the kitchen. She was standing on a stool, trying to reach the bowls from the cabinet. I stepped in and helped her down gently. "You don't have to do that," I said. She looked at me and asked, "Why didn't Mom say goodbye?" I crouched down, met her eyes. "I don't know," I said truthfully. "But I'm here now. And you're safe. That's what matters today." She nodded slowly, then leaned into me, letting her guard down for the first time. I held her for a moment, steady, strong, and calm. The part of me that loved them, really loved them, was still intact, but it wouldn't stop me from doing what needed to be done. I fed the kids, bathed the youngest, and managed to coax the twins into a long nap. Then I sat on the back porch with my laptop and began building the file. A shared Google Drive folder. Photos of the note. A video of the house when I arrived, quiet, unattended children. A timeline of events, including the text from my mother, which confirmed she was aware of the situation. If anyone questioned my motives, I wanted proof. Not because I feared retaliation, but because I had no interest in being painted as the villain in the story they were surely already crafting. I wasn't the angry sister. I wasn't bitter or jealous or dramatic. I was the one who had finally stopped playing along. Later that afternoon, I received another message. This one was from Tara. "Heard you're there. Thank you so much. We'll be back before you know it. Kids are lucky to have you." She was wrong. They weren't lucky. They were innocent. And I was done being the stand-in for people who only showed up for the fun parts of parenting. As the sun began to lower, casting a warm hue over the porch, I made one more phone call. Not to the police. Not yet. First, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, Alana Brooks, an old law school roommate who'd gone on to become a high-profile child advocate. She answered on the third ring. "Camille?" she said, surprised. "Wow, it's been too long, I know. I'm calling because I need your expertise. Something serious." There was a pause. Then her voice changed, sharpened. "Talk to me." By the time we hung up, she had already connected me with 2 agencies, one of whom promised to send a field agent within 24 hours. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, watching the children sleep on the baby monitor and sipping tea from a mug that said "World's Best Daughter." I turned it in my hand slowly, amused by the irony. Let them have their cocktails in cabanas. Let them post curated sunsets and boomerangs of champagne glasses clinking above ocean views. When they came back, there would be no soft landing. There would be no forgiveness wrapped in a tired sigh and another sacrifice. I wasn't the world's best daughter anymore. I was something else entirely. And they had no idea what I'd become. Stood in the hallway outside the nursery, the soft whir of a white noise machine filling the space. Melody's twins had finally gone down for a nap. The older boys were in the den, immersed in a cartoon marathon, and Mia was curled up on the armchair with a book she had probably read 10 times before. The house was calm, unnaturally so. But inside me, a storm had been building for hours, and now it was quiet enough to listen to it. I walked into the kitchen and shut the door behind me. Pulled out my phone, dialed Tara again, still voicemail. Then Melody. The same. I didn't expect them to answer. Deep down, I knew they had their phones off on purpose, probably sipping overpriced cocktails on a beach in Maui, smug in their belief that Camille would handle it. Camille always handled it, not this time. I opened the Google Drive folder I'd created the night before, the note, the photos, the timestamps. Then I added something new. A video clip I had taken just an hour ago of the kids playing quietly while I listed their names and ages aloud. Left without guardians, no emergency contacts reachable, no legal documentation authorizing care. The file was growing just like my resolve. I called the police first. The dispatcher was efficient, though clearly surprised. I told her I wasn't their parent, wasn't given consent, wasn't staying voluntarily. When she asked how long the children had been left alone, I gave her a precise answer. They were dropped off in a house with no adult supervision. I arrived and found them on their own. Their mothers are out of state and cannot be reached. The next call was to Child Protective Services. I gave my name and position, clarified my relationship to the children, and emphasized that this was not a custody situation. I was not offering to take temporary guardianship. I was reporting a violation. It was a statement of fact, not emotion. "Someone will be dispatched within the hour," the woman on the other end said, her tone brisk but empathetic. "Please keep the children safe and don't leave them alone." "I won't," I said. "But you should know, this isn't the first time. They've done something like this. It's just the first time I didn't cover it up." When I hung up, I stood for a moment, letting the gravity of my actions settle in. I wasn't just reporting them. I was dismantling the entire structure they'd built around me. I was removing the keystone from the arch they had leaned on for years. The knock came sooner than expected. A police cruiser pulled up to the curb and 2 uniformed officers stepped out. I met them at the door, calm, composed, fully aware of how this would look. They introduced themselves, asked to see the bay. Children asked if anyone had been hurt. I answered everything clearly, with no defensiveness, no apology. They inspected the house, spoke to Mia, gently, carefully, and nodded when she told them, "Mommy didn't say goodbye. She just said we'd be safe here until Auntie Camille came." Next came the social worker. Her name was Nadine. Late 40s, kind eyes, notebook always in hand. She asked me to sit down and we went over the details. She didn't seem surprised by the story. That was almost the saddest part. "I see this more often than you'd think," she said, her pen barely stopping. "Overextended women, invisible. Labor, families that treat the most responsible member as free childcare. Except this time, I said. The free part ended. She looked at me, something like respect in her expression. You did the right thing. Most people in your position wouldn't have had the courage. It's not courage, I replied. It's exhaustion, finally calcified into clarity. They determined the children were not in immediate danger, but agreed the situation was a clear case of abandonment. They'll stay here for the night, but a formal inquiry is being filed. The mothers will be contacted and required to return within 24 hours or face charges. As the officers left, Nadine stayed behind for a few moments longer. Is there anyone else in the family who might try to intervene on their behalf? I gave a dry laugh. My mother, maybe. But she's part of the reason this dynamic exists in the first place. Well, if she shows up, let her know this is now an active case. And if you need help, support, legal resources, anything, call me directly. She handed me her card. After she left, I stood in the doorway and watched the cruiser drive away, the weight of the last hour sinking into my chest. But it wasn't dread I felt. It was control. Not long after, my phone rang. It was a FaceTime request from Tara. I ignored it. Then a barrage of texts followed. Tara, what did you do? Tara, are you serious right now? Melody, Camille, pick up the damn phone. Mom, you are overreacting. Just handle it like you always do. I let the notifications pile up. I was done responding to demands masked as desperation. That night, after the kids had eaten dinner and settled into makeshift beds, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened my laptop. I clicked on my email and typed a single message, addressed to my mentor at work, Michael Russo. The subject line read, "Taking emergency personal time. Full context attached." Inside the email, I laid out a brief but professional explanation. Family left 5 minors in my care without consent or legal authorization. Authorities have been notified. I may need 2 days off to cooperate with child services and police. Will remain available via email for anything urgent. Please advise if more formal documentation is needed. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in decades, I felt the ground shift beneath me, but not in fear, in power. I had stopped being the one they assumed would bend. I had started becoming the one who decided when the game was over. Let them scream. Let them fly home early in a panic. Let them try to spin the story their way. The difference now? I wasn't standing on their script anymore. I was writing my own. It was just past 8 p.m. when the silence cracked. The twins were finally down, the older kids were watching a movie in the living room, and I was in the kitchen typing up an official statement for Nadine, the social worker, when the doorbell rang. The knock that followed wasn't hesitant. It was frantic, loud, and fast. I already knew who it was. I didn't move right away. I closed my laptop gently, stood, and adjusted the sleeves of my shirt. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a reckoning. When I opened the door, there they were. My mother, Tara, and Melody, windblown, sunburned, and visibly shaken. Tara's hair was still damp, probably from a resort pool. Melody's face was splotchy, her mascara smudged from either crying or rushing. And my mother, Camille Rivers, the matriarch, the master manipulator masked as a matron, was clutching her handbag like it could somehow shield her from accountability. "Camille," she gasped, stepping forward. "What have you done?" I didn't answer. I simply stepped aside and let them in. The tension rolled in with them, thick as smoke. Tara was the first to break. "Why would you call CPS?" she demanded, her voice already cracking under the weight of panic. "You could have just talked to us." "I tried," I said calmly. "But neither of you answered your phones. And the truth is, Tara, there was nothing to talk about. You abandoned your children." Melody raised her hands like I'd just accused them of murder. "It was just a week. They were safe. With you. With me? I echoed, stepping forward, voice low and lethal. Without asking, without confirming, without even telling your own children. You left them in a house alone and expected me to clean it up. Again. Mom tried to intervene. Always the peacemaker when she sensed things were no longer in her control. Sweetheart, please. You've always been so dependable. You've taken care of your sisters since you were a teenager. That's what family does. And there it was. The old script. That suffocating anthem of guilt disguised as tradition. I met her eyes and said, "No, that's what I did, because I was taught to believe love meant sacrifice. But all of you have taken and taken, without ever asking what it cost." The kids peeked in from the living room, sensing the shift. I gently closed the door behind me so they wouldn't hear the next part. They didn't deserve to be caught in this wreckage. The police, I continued, are filing a preliminary report. Nadine's building a case file. There are photos, statements, timestamps. Your phones were off, your absence was unauthorized, and your children were left with no legal guardian. You didn't forget. You chose. And choices have consequences. Tara stepped back like she'd been slapped. "Are you trying to ruin our lives?" she asked. "Is that what this is about?" "No," I replied. "This is about reclaiming mine." Melody started pacing. "We just needed a break. Do you have any idea what it's like to raise kids? Non-stop?" "Yes," I snapped. "Because I raised you. And you still expect me to." Mom's voice grew sharp now, slipping from concerned into confrontational. "So what? You're punishing the entire family because you're bitter? Because you didn't go on the trip?" I almost laughed. "You really think this is about a trip? No, this is about 20 years of being treated like a utility. It's about being everyone's plan B. It's about spending my birthday alone. Last year while you were at a spa and then getting a text asking me to babysit the next morning." They were stunned into silence. I moved across the room, picked up the envelope they had left me with, and held it up. "This is your confession. You handed it to me like I'd be flattered. Like abandoning 5 kids was a small favor. You don't even see what you've become." Tara sat down, holding her head in her hands. "What's going to happen now?" "I don't know," I said. "That's for the authorities to decide. You'll need to work with CPS. There will be follow-ups, interviews, likely court appearances. You'll need legal counsel. You'll need to prove you're capable of being responsible parents." Melody groaned. "This is insane." "No," I corrected. "What you did was insane. This is accountability." My mother stood frozen, her voice lower now. "Camille, we're your family." I looked her dead in the eye. "And family should have protected me, not expected me to carry them forever." At that moment, there was another knock. This time it was Nadine. I opened the door, and she nodded politely at the 3 women now, clustered together in shame and disbelief. "I'll need to speak with the mothers in the other room," she said. "All business." "Of course," I said, stepping aside. "Take your time." As they followed Nadine into the den, I walked back toward the living room where the children were still quietly watching their movie. Mia looked up at me with wide eyes, as if she could sense something had changed. I sat beside her and took her hand. "You okay?" I asked softly. She nodded. "Are they in trouble?" "They made some bad choices," I said. "And when people do that, they have to answer for them." She leaned against me, tired but calm. "Will we still see you?" I kissed the top of her head. "I'm not going anywhere right now." But inside, I knew something had shifted permanently. I was no longer their fallback. I was no longer their emotional housekeeper. The system they'd built around my silence had just collapsed. And I wasn't going to be the one to rebuild it. Let them face the wreckage. I'd already moved on. The morning after the confrontation felt unnervingly quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the heavy, suspended silence that settles after a storm, where the wreckage is still being counted, and no one quite knows how bad the damage really is. The kids were gone. CPS had taken temporary custody, just as Nadine had said they might. Tara and Melody had left sometime after midnight, too shaken to argue, too shocked to beg. My mother had said nothing else. She simply stared at me like I was someone she no longer recognized. In that moment, she was right. I wasn't who I used to be. Back in Brooklyn, I stepped into my high-rise apartment and dropped my keys on the counter with a clatter that seemed to echo louder than it should have. I should have felt victorious, or vindicated. But I didn't. What I felt was sobering clarity, like seeing the scaffolding of your life collapse in slow motion, only to realize you never wanted it built that way to begin with. I returned to work that Monday, dressed in sharp navy slacks and a blouse the color of steel. I wasn't hiding my fatigue. I wore it like armor. The office, surprisingly, welcomed me with the same reverence I'd earned over years of unrelenting output. But something had shifted. I no longer moved through the halls like I owed anyone my time. By noon, I was in the corner office, presenting quarterly projections to the senior team. My hands didn't tremble. My voice didn't falter. Because while my family had unraveled, I had remained intact. Hardened, maybe, but not broken. After the meeting, as the others trickled out, my mentor, Michael Russo, stayed behind. He watched me with the kind of knowing gaze that made you feel seen without a word being said. "You want the truth?" I asked, dropping into the leather chair across from his. "I think you've earned it," he replied. I told him everything. Not the sanitized version, not the polite summary. The truth. About the abandonment, the betrayal, the years of erasure, masked as obligation, the police, CPS, the children, the note, the aftermath. He listened, didn't interrupt, just leaned back, his fingers steepled under his chin. And when I was finished, he said 6 words that hit harder than anything my family had ever said to me. "You should have done it years ago." I blinked. "You're not shocked?" "I'm a father," he said. "I've seen what happens when you rely on one child to carry the weight for everyone else. It starts with skipped parties and missed field trips. Then it becomes skipped. Years, missed lives. You didn't betray them, Camille. You exposed the betrayal they normalized." Something in me exhaled. Something buried so deep I hadn't realized it was still holding on. "But you know what worries me?" he added. "You're excellent at setting expectations at work. Boundaries, timelines, accountability. You've never applied that same clarity to your personal life." "I thought I wasn't allowed to," I admitted. "Well," he said, standing, "now you know better. The question is, what are you going to build in the space you just reclaimed?" Later that week, I received a call from Nadine. Her voice was professional, but I could sense the exhaustion beneath it. "Camille, we've officially filed for temporary protective custody. Tara and Melody have been served. They'll be attending a court hearing next week to determine next steps." "And the kids?" I asked. "They're safe. A short-term foster placement, well-trained, local. But Mia keeps asking about you." That pause, the one no social worker ever enjoys, settled in the space between us. I knew what she was leading up to. "She trusts you," Nadine continued. "Would you consider supervised visitation? You wouldn't be responsible for them. Legally. Just provide some stability during transition." My mind flashed back to Mia's quiet voice in the living room. "Will we still see you?" And my answer, honest but incomplete, "I'm not going anywhere right now." "Yes," I said, "but only under the terms you mentioned. No more blurred lines." "No blurred lines," Nadine repeated. "Noted." That night, I took a long walk through Prospect Park, headphones in, phone off. The air was cool, sharp with the scent of oncoming fall. For the first time in what felt like a decade, I didn't feel the invisible rope of responsibility around my neck. Back at my apartment, I found a letter slid under the door. No stamp, no envelope, just folded paper. I opened it. It was from my mother, Camille. You've humiliated us. You've shattered everything this family stands for. But if you still have any decency left, you'll call and help your sisters. We're drowning. Mom, it should have made me angry. It didn't. It made me sad. Because even now, she didn't understand. The family hadn't shattered because of my actions. It had collapsed under the weight of its own denial, of its refusal to adapt, to see me as a person instead of a resource. I placed the letter in the drawer, beside the folded envelope from Tara, the one she left me along with her children and her assumptions. 2 monuments to the old system, 2 warnings never to go back, and then I pulled out a fresh notebook and wrote 3 words on the first page. My life starts. Because now, finally, it did. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after you burn a bridge, not the kind that echoes with regret, but the kind that hums with freedom. That's the silence I woke up to. No more midnight texts from Tara begging for last-minute babysitting. No more calls from Melody asking if I could pick up formula on my way home. No guilt-laced voicemails from my mother reminding me of what a blessing I'd always been. It was all gone. The noise, the pull, the constant demand on my time and energy vanished like smoke. But silence can be disorienting when you've been wired to answer everyone else's chaos. For the first few days, I found myself instinctively checking my phone, scanning for signs of crisis, waiting for the next emergency I'd be expected to solve. When none came, I realized this is what it feels like to reclaim your life. The office became my sanctuary. Not because I buried myself in work, but because it was the only place where boundaries had always existed and were respected. I started arriving later, leaving earlier. I took lunches, real ones. I even paused in the middle of meetings to ask myself if I wanted to be there, or if I was just fulfilling another role I'd never questioned. That small awareness was everything. One afternoon, Michael Russo, my mentor and now my silent champion, stopped by my desk. "Walk with me," he said. We walked through the lower floors of the building where the brand's creative department worked. He pointed toward a mural being painted along the far wall, an abstract piece, full of bold colors and jagged strokes. "You ever paint?" he asked. I blinked. "Used to, back in college. It was my escape." He nodded like he already knew. "Start again, or write, travel. Do something for you that no one else gets to claim." It wasn't advice. It was permission. The kind I never needed, but hearing it from someone who wasn't trying to extract something from me made it land differently. That night, I dug through a box I hadn't opened in 10 years and pulled out an old sketchbook. The pages were worn, but full of life. My life. The person I'd buried beneath duties, diapers, and emotional debt. I picked up a pencil and started to draw. My hands were stiff, my lines hesitant. But with each stroke, I started to remember who I was before I became who they needed. Soon after, I joined a kickboxing class at a gym in Prospect Heights. At first, I signed up just to get out of the apartment. But after the first class, I realized how much I needed a place to put all the fire that had been building inside me. Every punch I landed on the bag felt like a release of guilt, of frustration, of the echoing words, "You're so responsible." By the end of that first session, I was drenched, exhausted, and reborn. That same week, Nadine called. "We've begun transitioning the kids back into short, supervised visits with their mothers," she explained. "It'll be a slow process, court-mandated parenting classes, regular check-ins. But they're cooperating." "And Mia?" I asked, the only child who still lingered in my mind. "She's asking about you again." I hesitated. She's a good kid. She's a lot like you, Nadine said softly. That hit harder than I expected. Would you like to see her? Nadine asked. We can set up a neutral environment. No obligation, just a visit. I agreed, but on one condition. Mia wouldn't be told in advance. If she asked for me again, they'd let me know, but I wouldn't become a fixture she had to depend on. I wasn't going to raise another generation out of guilt. In the meantime, I focused on something else. Joy. Not the loud, Instagrammable kind, the private kind. I booked a trip to Portland on a whim, something I'd talked about for years and never made time for. I hiked. I read entire novels in cafes. I sat by rivers and didn't check my phone. I even kissed a man I met at a bookstore, a fleeting spark that didn't last, but reminded me I was still capable of feeling something that had nothing to do with duty. One evening, back in Brooklyn, I attended a networking event for women executives. There was a speaker, CEO of a tech startup, who said something I'll never forget. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are strategic. That word, strategic, fit me like armor, because I hadn't burned my family down out of rage. I had made a calculated decision to stop hemorrhaging energy into people who treated my time like it was free. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. By the end of the event, a woman I'd never met approached me. Camille Rivers, right? I've heard about the Jensen pitch you led. Bold stuff. Thanks, I said, surprised. That one was personal, she smiled. Shows. We're looking for someone to lead a new brand division. Global. Something tells me you'd kill it. I took her card. Not because I was ready to leave, but because for the first time, I knew I had choices. And choices were power. When I got home, I passed my hallway mirror and caught my own reflection. Shoulders back, chin up, no apology in my gaze. For the first time in a long time, I liked the woman staring back at me. Not because she was successful or dependable or admired, but because she was finally hers. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when the past knocked on my door. I had just wrapped up a strategy meeting with the creative team and was reviewing a brand audit report when Tiffany, my assistant, appeared at the glass wall of my office, eyes wide with unease. She didn't even knock before cracking the door open. Camille, she said in a low voice, your sister is here. I looked up. Which one? Tara. Of course. Alone? She said she needs 5 minutes. She looks shaken. I nodded once. Send her in. Tiffany hesitated. Are you sure? I'm always sure. The moment Tara stepped into the office, it was like watching a faded version of someone I used to know. Her skin had lost its usual glow. The designer clothes still hung on her, but they didn't carry the same arrogance. She stood with slumped shoulders, clutching her purse like it might give her answers. I gestured toward the chair across from my desk, but I didn't stand. I wanted her to know. This was my space now. Camille, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for seeing me. I said nothing. Just folded my hands and waited. She cleared her throat, forced a shaky smile. Look, I know things have been difficult, but I came here because we need your help. There it was, the unspoken script. Let's skip the apology and jump straight to the request. We? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Tara and Melody, she said quickly. And Mom. Things are bad, Camille. CPS hasn't lifted the restrictions yet. We're doing the parenting classes, court-mandated, evaluations, the whole thing. But it's been almost a year. The legal fees are draining us. Draining who exactly? Tara looked up, her composure cracking. Mom cashed out her retirement. Melody's husband left. I'm barely making rent. We're about to lose the house, and we thought maybe, just maybe, you'd consider a loan. I leaned back slowly, letting her words hang between us like smoke. A loan? I repeated. Yes, Just enough to keep things afloat. You've always been the stable one. And I know that's not fair to say, not after everything. But we're desperate. No, I said, flat and final. Tara blinked. What? You're not here because you see me. You're here because you need me, again, and you still think I owe you something. She stood, anger rising. This isn't just about me, Camille. These are your nieces and nephews. No, I said, standing to meet her gaze now. They are your children, yours, and you don't get to weaponize their innocence against me anymore. You walked out on them, on me. You plotted a lie with Melody, left your children without a word, and you're lucky I didn't press for full charges. You already destroyed us. I let out a low breath, not a sigh, measured, deliberate. No, Tara, I exposed the truth. There's a difference. She shook her head. I don't recognize you. That's the most honest thing you've said, I replied. Because the woman you once knew, the one who gave up vacations, birthdays, relationships to make your life easier, she's gone. You can blame me all you want. But the only thing I'm guilty of now is choosing myself. Tara's voice cracked. So you're just cutting us off? I didn't flinch. I'm cutting the rope I've been dragging you all with. She sat back down slowly, as if the weight of her own failure had finally settled in. You really hate us, don't you? No, I've never hated you. That's the problem. If I did, this would be easy. But I loved you. I raised you. And instead of growing up and standing beside me, you used that love like a leash. Tara's silence said everything. For the first time, I saw her not as my sister, but as an adult who had chosen cowardice over responsibility, convenience over respect. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded letter. From Mia, she said, softly. She asked me to give it to you. She still talks about you every day. I took the letter but didn't open it. Not yet. She's been asking why you haven't visited, Tara added. I told her you've been busy, but I think she's starting to understand. Good, I said, carefully placing the letter on my desk. Let her understand. Let her see what boundaries look like. She deserves better than to grow up thinking love means sacrificing yourself for people who only call when they're drowning. Tara stood again, but this time without resistance. So that's it? For now, I said. Unless you're here to change, not to plead, not to manipulate, but to genuinely change. I don't know how, she admitted. Then start by learning, I said. It's what the rest of us do. She walked to the door, paused, and looked back. You're cold. No, I replied. I'm finally warm. You just never noticed what cold really looked like until I stopped holding. You're fire. After she left, I locked the door behind her. I picked up Mia's letter, unfolded the childish handwriting, and read, Dear Aunt Camille, I miss you. I like my new room, but it's not the same. I remember when you made pancakes in funny shapes. I hope you're okay. I think about you when I draw. Love, Mia. I placed the letter in the top drawer, beside the others. Tara's note, Melody's apology email, my mother's guilt-laced holiday card. Monuments to a version of myself I'd buried with intention. I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled. They still didn't get it. And maybe they never would. But I did. And that was enough. It had been nearly a year since I made the call that cracked my family in half. Since then, I had learned how to wake up without guilt, walk without the burden of invisible chains, and sleep without the background noise of everyone else's emergencies. My days had taken on a rhythm that was entirely mine. Work, reflection, movement, solitude, connection, but only on my terms. It was the life I never knew I could have. One built not on obligation, but intention. But healing doesn't erase history, and freedom doesn't erase memory. I still thought about the kids. Sometimes in the middle of the night when the apartment was too quiet. Sometimes when I saw a child draw something on a cafe napkin, and I thought of Mia and her misspelled love. Notes. And every now and then, in the echo of my own silence, I remembered that I hadn't just walked away from chaos. I'd walked away from a role I once believed defined my worth. So when Nadine called again, I wasn't surprised. "Camille," she began, always direct, always calm. "Tara and Melody are nearing the end of their compliance period. There's a custody review scheduled for next month. But the judge wants a character statement." "From you," I paused. "Me? You were the reporting party, and you have a long-standing relationship with the children. Your words will matter." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. That night, I sat at my desk and pulled out a fresh page. I stared at it for almost an hour. Then I wrote one line. Dependability is not the same as consent. The next morning, I met Nadine at the courthouse. I handed her the sealed envelope, nodded once, and walked away before she could ask for more. That afternoon, I returned to the office early from lunch. Tiffany met me at the door with an unreadable expression. "Your mom called," she said quietly. "Twice." I raised an eyebrow. She said she was coming by. She didn't ask. Of course she didn't. At 2:17 p.m. she arrived. Right on schedule, like the storm you know is coming but still brace for out of instinct. Camille Rivers looked smaller than I remembered. She had always carried herself with the posture of a woman in control, chin high, tone sweet, language laced with compliments that doubled as expectations. But now, her frame sagged under the weight of consequences. Her pearls looked like costume, jewelry. Her shoes were scuffed. I didn't offer her a seat. "Camille," she said softly, stepping into the office like it still belonged to her. "I didn't come to argue." "Then I assume you came to listen." She hesitated. "I came to ask for help." I didn't respond, just stared at her, letting the silence stretch until it made her squirm. "Your father lost his consulting contract. The house is under threat. Tara's job won't cover her legal fees, and Melody, well, you know Melody." Her voice cracked. "We need support." I leaned against the edge of my desk, arms crossed. "You need money." She flinched. "We need family." "No," I said coldly. "You need a bailout." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. Not the kind of nothing that numbs, the kind that clarifies. "After all we've done for you." "Done to me," I corrected. "Not for me. You raised me to serve, not to thrive. You built your comfort on my exhaustion. You called it love, but it was labor. I never meant—" "You never meant to get caught," I said, cutting her off. "You never meant for your choices to cost you comfort. That's what this is about. Not remorse. Inconvenience." Her shoulders collapsed. "I miss you," she whispered. "No," I replied. "You miss the version of me who never said no." She looked up. "Is there anything I can say to make this right?" "There's nothing you can say. You had 30 years to act differently. You spent every one of them reinforcing that my value only existed in relation to what I gave. Then what happens now?" she asked, almost pleading. "Now," I said slowly, "you live with your choices, the way I lived with mine for decades, and maybe, one day, you'll learn what I had to learn the hard way. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're protection." She turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. "You really won't help?" "I already did," I said, voice like steel. "I survived you." After she left, I closed my office door and sat at my desk. My hands were steady, my breath even. I didn't feel righteous. I felt whole. That evening, I attended my kickboxing class. We worked the bag hard that night. Every punch a memory released, every block a promise to myself. After class, I walked home in the rain, soaked and smiling. Back in my apartment, I opened the drawer where I kept Mia's letter. I read it one more time, then folded it and placed it back between the pages of my sketchbook. I hadn't given up on her, or any of them, really. I had just chosen myself first. And finally, I understood. Saying no wasn't rejection. It was self-respect in its most unshakable form. It's been over a year since I stood in my parents' living room, 5 children behind me and a betrayal in my hands. A year since I made the call that turned my family's world upside down and finally set mine right. In that time, so much has changed, and so much hasn't. I still pass familiar corners of the city that echo with memory, the school I walked, Melody to when she forgot her science project, the bakery where Tara would drop off Mia, pretending she had an urgent meeting when it was really a date, the apartment building my mother helped me move into but never visited after. These places used to anchor me to a past I couldn't shake. Now, they remind me of the boundaries I've reclaimed. I no longer feel responsible for everyone else's happiness. That weight has been lifted. Not because they gave me permission, but because I stopped asking for it. Work is still demanding, but now I protect my time like currency. I travel more. I sketch again. I've begun mentoring a group of young professionals, women like me who were taught that saying yes was the only way to be loved. I teach them to say no with grace, with strength, and without apology. And Mia? We write letters. I've visited her twice, supervised, brief, but warm. She's growing. She's asking better questions. And more importantly, she's learning that love doesn't mean disappearing into someone else's needs. That's a cycle I was born into, and one I've worked relentlessly to break. As for Tara, Melody, and my mother, the silence has returned. But now it feels like peace. I don't check in. I don't engage. And I don't explain. Recently, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, sipping wine and watching the lights of the city flicker into life. It hit me how many years I spent trying to be someone else's version of good. Good daughter, good sister, good aunt, good woman. And in the process, I became invisible, to them and almost to myself. But now, I am visible, entirely, unequivocally. To me, I no longer measure love by how much I endure. I measure it by how well I protect myself while still being capable of compassion. I am no longer proud of how much I gave. I'm proud of how I stopped giving when it was no longer returned with respect. If you've ever been the one who holds everything together, if you've ever been the dependable one, the strong one, the one who's always there when everyone else drops the ball, let me tell you this. You are allowed to put the ball down. You are allowed to step back, say no, and walk away. You are allowed to protect your peace, even if it means disappointing the people who built their comfort on your sacrifice. I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I am better. This wasn't a story about revenge. This was a story about recognition, about rediscovering myself not in spite of the fire, but because of it. To everyone watching this, if you've ever felt like Camille, used, overlooked, expected to carry more than your share, this is your reminder that your worth isn't measured by what you endure. It's defined by what you choose. Choose rest. Choose peace. Choose boundaries. Choose you. And if this story resonated with you, even just one line of it, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us tell more stories like this, stories that matter, stories that speak truth in a world that too often rewards silence. Subscribe, share, and leave a comment below if this reminded you of someone, or if it reminded you of yourself. Because sometimes, the loudest revolution begins with a quiet, powerful no.